Welcome to the Rabbi and The Shrink. This is Dr. Margarita Gurri, aka Dr. Red Shoe, and I'm here with the good Rabbi Yonason Goldson.
Thank you, Doctor. And our guest today?
We're started off really well. And we have here Mark Brown, CSP. He is a world champion speaker. Many years ago, he won the Harlem Youth Speaking Award and the World Championship for Toastmasters. Yay! Amazing. He also has one of the most amazing points of view in terms of bullying and respect and how we treat each other. Mark Brown, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Red Shoe, and of course, my good friend, the good Rabbi, with whom I've had some very interesting and scintillating conversations over the last couple of years. He certainly makes me wiser every time we talk. So good to be with you both today. My pleasure.
Delighted you can be with us, Mark.
So when we asked you to come and speak, we said, what topic do you want to speak on that has to do with ethics? And you chose this whole thing about bullying and respect. So what is it you have to say? Because I know you have a lot to say. And I'm going to put a link right now of a video that you all have to watch. I'm putting it in the chat.
I think it's the Goldcast video, I guess.
Yes,
so please wait till after the podcast to watch the video.
Is that for Dave? Well, I tell you, you mentioned me winning the world title several years ago. I tell people, yes, I did. I won the World Championship of Public Speaking in the previous millennium, and I do have the VHS videotape to prove it. that was 26 years ago at the time of this recording in 1995. And I won that Toastmasters contest with a 6-minute, 42-second speech called A Second Chance. It was based on a Disney film called Beauty and the Beast, released, the animated version, released, I think, in 1993 or 94. And my whole theme was the idea of giving everyone a second chance, not being tied to first impressions, not being tied to what somebody else tells us, not being tied to what society tells us and what the rumor mill pours on us. I took that 7-minute speech. I spoke about intolerance, indifference, and ignorance. And I used the film as a metaphor for how we humans treat each other. Little did I know I'd end up changing that speech and expanding it to a 1-hour program for junior and senior high schools, which over 20 plus years, I delivered to over 1.2 million students in North America. The blessing was unexpected in that 1999, my program was recorded by PBS in Maine. It was sent to the Academy of TV Arts and Sciences, and I received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Youth Educational Program. At the New England Emmys, I did not win. You don't beat a production of The Diary of Anne Frank. That's not going to happen.
No.
But that was not the important thing. The important thing is and remains that over 1 million young people have seen that message, have heard that message. People still respond to the Toastmasters contest speech from 95, 26 years later. And it all began because I was watching the animated cartoon movie version of Beauty and the Beast in 1994 with my small children on a television set with a VHS videotape in the player, a videotape that got so bad and worn out, I had to get it replaced. But while watching the film, there's one scene in the movie, and if you see the live action, it's a very similar scene where at some point, Belle, who was of course, a beautiful girl who was a femme fatale, not really. She's a wonderful heroine of the show. And she's in loved and admired by this man, Gaston, who turned out to be the villain. Of course, he is jealous of her having some kind of relationship with this horrid creature called the Beast. Bear in mind, the Beast lives alone in a castle in isolation, bothering no one. But Gaston tells the village how awful this creature is. He begins to scare everyone. He spreads vicious rumors. He will destroy your lives. He'll eat your kids and all of this. And he whips his entire audience, his entire village into a frenzy. What do they do in response? They get their clubs, their knives, their pitchforks. They light flaming torches, and they march to the forest and they attack the castle. We don't like what we don't understand. In fact, It scares us, and this monster is mysterious at least. Bring your guns, bring your knives, save your children and your wives. We'll save the village and our lives. We'll kill the beast. This drama. A mob convenes to attack a castle and kill someone they have never met because one person of influence influences them. And I literally stopped the videotape. I pushed rewind, and for our millennials who listen, kind of goes like this. I rewound the videotape. I replayed the scene for my kids, and I made them listen to those words. We don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us. This monster is mysterious at least, so bring your guns, bring your knives, save your children, save your wives. We'll save our village and our lives. We'll kill the beast. A powerful message from my kids back in 1994, which I'm told, sadly, is still timely today, because we don't like what we don't understand. And very often it does scare us, and our response is intolerant. No attempt to understand, to build a bridge, to have a conversation. Instead, we vilify, we mock, we ridicule, we curse, and we end up physically attacking those whom we do not like or understand. And America, our country, has made that manifest over the last 4.5, 5 years, over 2 election cycles. And we can go deeper if you want. We don't have to. But I witnessed this. But I took it into the middle schools, grades 6, 7, 8, on through high school. And I watched the dynamic of kids in school. You go to a cafeteria, you've got the stoners, you've got the freaks and the weirdos, you got the jocks, you got the band kids, you've got the drama nerds, you've got all of these different pockets of mini societies in one middle school lunchroom. But they all have to come together at some point for assemblies and convocations. They live under the same roof, and they don't seem to be able to understand each other. And bullying often exists because someone is just different in some small way. And sometimes the difference isn't really clear, but someone like the Gaston chooses to identify it, to magnify it, focus on it, put a spotlight on it, and then inspire others, sadly, to then treat someone with disrespect, to hurt them, to wound them, to crush them. And the worst part is, history tells us there are many, many young people who receive that but don't handle it well. As a result, they hurt others, they hurt themselves. And as we all know, we've had tragedies of school shootings with notes left behind about how they were treated and how they responded. And many have made the poor choice to take their own lives as a result. I say all that to say 3 words. This is serious. That's the background. Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah. There's so many different thoughts just went through my head. It's hard to know where to start. But I've heard it said that all fear stems from fear of the unknown. And because the unknown makes us feel vulnerable, makes us feel that we're not in control, makes us feel that we are threatened or we are endangered. And when we are, well, what we try to do is we try to assert control over this situation that feels out of our hands. And often that brings about some sort of aggression. If I can identify a concrete enemy, now I know how to define the relationship, and that somehow makes me feel more secure. Even though the security is really just an illusion. But there's one point that I'd like to draw out that's a little bit tangential, but I think is really, really intrinsic to your story. That when we consume entertainment, I mean, you were, I'm just guessing, but you were probably not watching Beauty and the Beast because you wanted to watch it. I'm guessing you were watching it because your children wanted to watch it.
Of course. Of course.
And yet you found a profound lesson in that you were able to communicate to your children, to audiences, and which presumably the creators of the movie intentionally implanted. And this is why the responsibility of us as consumers of media to look for lessons, and the responsibilities of those who create media to project and communicate responsible lessons. This is part of how a civil culture, a civil society grows, remains healthy, continually matures. And the very relevant observation you made is that we're not, the message is there, but we're still not getting it.
Well, we do like to be entertained. I do want to hear Dr. Red Shoe's take on this. Yes, we do like to be entertained. And over the years, I've heard people make comments about what they heard about how bad Disney is in one particular area, and they don't do this or they don't do that. And we've heard about boycotts of all kinds. I'm not going to delve into this, but I want to piggyback on one thing you said, the responsibility to embed a message, to paraphrase. And I do tend to look for messages everywhere I go. I'm a self-confessed word nerd. To me, words mean things. So I choose my words carefully. I try anyway to choose words carefully. But I noticed there are other films that Disney has produced that carry similar messaging. For example, there's Pocahontas.
Yes.
There's one song in Pocahontas that is sung by both the Native Americans and those who have come on the ship. And the lyric says, savages, barely even human. And the irony is, in split screen, the locals are saying the same words as are the visitors of the ship. So we got the Native Americans and the English, and they're both saying savages, barely even human. We see each other in the same way they see us. And what would it take to try to understand? We don't like what we don't understand. The question becomes, Dr. Red Shoe, how then do we try to understand? Stephen Covey is noted for saying, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I'm told St. Francis of Assisi has it in his prayer, granted I may not so much seek to understand, to be understood as to understand. So we have two different sources saying, let's try and do that. That sounds nice. So if we don't like what we don't understand, how then do we come to a place where we begin to understand? How do we even begin the dialogue, which I believe is the ethical thing to do? And I may not have the answer. And I do not want to exclude the good doctor from our conversation. I'd love to hear what she's nodding and smiling. I'd love to hear what she has to say in response to my comment.
Well, my mother, I think, had the answer. I came to this country at the age of 4 as a refugee from Cuba, and we got beat up for being different. I didn't speak the English. I didn't eat the right food. I certainly didn't look American at that time, the way we dressed. And I would get beat up and I'd rush home, and my mother and father would clean us our bloody noses and whatever up. And my mother would say, that's Jesus. And I would always say, Jesus has a great right hook. She said, go show him who you are. So her understanding of what makes people connect is first find a way to have the courage to be yourself, show them love, and show them who you are. Don't let anyone define you. And one step at a time. So I learned to be fast, I learned to be funny, and I learned to be curious. And I think those are 3 things we need if we're going to fight prejudice and the injustice of who's right and who's a right kind of person to lead or to love. It is not about right or wrong. That's ethics. It's about what we're comfortable with. And I think if we're comfortable with ourselves, so my mother was saying that, find a way to get comfortable with them. And I think she had the secret there. Like Belle, she just went back to her humanity. Pobrecito, the beast, got all beat up saving her. He was a beast. He was a brute. And so she comes up and she just is a human being and helps him and thanks him. Yeah. And he had not had that kind of kindness from somebody who didn't work for him in a long time. And all it takes is that one little instance of humanity that's shared.
You know, you said, I didn't forewarn you. I'm also one of the world's worst punsters. I mean,
so am I. I love fun.
My kids roll their eyes at me all the time, and they please that don't.
That just makes you a father, Mark.
You said you were learning, you learned to be fast and to be curious, not fast and furious. But that said, I do appreciate what you talked about, being yourself and finding that piece of you and of them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I thought of the the old diagram of the circles.
Yes.
I'm here and they're here. How can I find this piece? How can I find the concentric circles? That part of the circle, we can find some common ground. And I've learned that when we have vast differences, and that piece may be small, but sometimes that one small piece is the first step in connecting and drawing those circles closer together. But very often, who takes the first step? Who makes the first move? That's another part of the equation that can be a bit thorny.
It is. In some cultures, the person who takes the first step is the leader. In other cultures, they're the loser. So some of that theory about the first step, but I pose that the first step is often unseen. It's a shift in our hearts, our souls, our mind, the words that we choose. And we're all word nerds here, so welcome.
I'm safe. I feel at home.
You are safe. Not safe from a bad pun, but you're safe. And I think that how we even choose to think about somebody, like if someone hurts your feelings, it's easy to just say they're horrible, they're terrible, they're this, they're that. I think a better question is why. What motivated them? Then we don't have to ask them that. You'll get beat up in some neighborhoods for asking that. But why? ¿Por qué? Why did that happen? And what is it about me that facilitated it? Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just the way I look. Maybe it's the way I sound. Maybe I remind them of a Sunday school teacher that beat them. Who knows? But I think asking the question is more important than getting the answer. And you don't ask it of the other person. We give the other people too much power.
I'll let Rabbi come in here. I know he's chomping at the bit.
He is. He's always got a great story. Rabbi, I'm ready.
I always have three things I want to say at the same time. I haven't quite figured out how to do that.
Well, let me hear
we're
you
at
try.
an interesting, yeah. It's called speaking in tongues, I think. We're at an interesting place in the Jewish calendar right now. We just finished the holiday of Passover, and we are 5 weeks out from the holiday of Shavuos, which I think is translated as Pentecost. It's the celebration of receiving the Torah at Sinai. And this period is supposed to be one of the most joyous seasons in the Jewish calendar. It has become a period of profound mourning because about 2,000 years ago, one of our greatest sages ever, Rabbi Akiva, had an institution, he had a seminary, a school with 24,000 students. And shortly after Passover, there was a plague, if you could imagine such a thing. And the students started dying at an extraordinary rate. And throughout this period, they all died. It's a dispute in history whether 5 survived out of 24,000 or whether none survived. And in retrospect, in hindsight, the sages tried to understand what brought about this catastrophe. And they explained that they did not have sufficient respect for one another. Now, what's really remarkable is that it's not that they were calling each other loser or stupid or sticking their feet out and tripping each other in the aisles. If we would have been there, we wouldn't have seen anything disrespectful going on. But when one of them would hear another expressing an idea that didn't immediately fit in with his way of looking at things, there was a dismissive attitude, just tuning out. Oh, he's coming from that, he's holding that point of view. He's not in line with me. I don't really need to pay too much attention to what he's saying. Now, why would such a small defect produce such an extraordinary response? Because these were the next generation of leaders and scholars and sages And culture goes from the top down. And what's a little defect in a leader will manifest as a huge defect in a culture. And so instead of elevating themselves and refining themselves in a way that preserved and communicated respect for our differences, they missed that. And that defect proved fatal, because it's a lesson for future generations that freedom is a tremendous opportunity. Freedom is not the goal. Freedom is a tool. Freedom is a privilege. And what we do with that freedom is what defines us and determines our greatness or the opposite.
Well, I think as a refugee, I agree with everything you say, but I elevate the idea of freedom. I think freedom is more than a privilege, it's an obligation.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's based on, I think, what we say and do and don't say and don't do. And Mark, you've been with middle school kids. You know that we can sully someone's reputation by doing and saying nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? So what are your thoughts, Mark Brown?
Quite a bit to unpack there.
The rabbi is always fun to unpack.
Of course.
He has me thinking for weeks.
His wisdom is great. And, you know, to say I fully understand your background would be dishonest. However, I am also an immigrant. For those who are not sure yet, I was not born in Central Georgia. I was born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica.
I noticed that Southern accent. Yes.
Yes, indeed, y'all. And I am privileged to have made a life for myself over 40 plus years here in America. I was 18 when I came to America, and I had 2 suitcases. I had $40 to start my life. That's all my father could give me at the time. And I won't go into his brave story himself, but I can appreciate what freedom represents. And, you know, when we have, and there are those who will disagree completely with what I'm going to say now, but I'll say it anyway. When we acknowledge the military, I am always quick to acknowledge anyone who has served in this country. From this perspective, as an immigrant, I realize that the philosophy of defending and justice and right and fighting for what's right, even if when we don't sometimes as a nation, but the idea that this country fights for some degree of freedom, it's that freedom which allowed me as an immigrant to come to America with almost nothing and to build a life for myself and for my family. So I appreciate being given the opportunities to have such freedom. So I do consider I have a responsibility to use it well and wisely, not just in terms of receiving, but what can I give? What can I share? How can I use the blessings I have to serve and bless others? There are those who may not agree with that. But the idea of those with the responsibility of shaping a culture, not doing so with a great level of insight, thought, wisdom, and fear. The righteous kind of fear says, I do not want to mess up. That kind of fear. Yes. If we find ourselves calling what we think, what we want, what we believe, and we don't serve those who come after us, we don't serve those who are under our influence, we run the risk of our society degenerating at a rapid rate. And if we pause and look around, there are signs of that happening even now. And I guess the call, not just to be morally upstanding, but I think the call to be decent, to be civil, to be thoughtful, to be respectful, to be understanding of those who are different. And, you know, the word tolerance often gets misused and misapplied. And I'll tell you what my perspective on tolerance is. For you to be tolerant means you must accept, embrace, endorse, and publish what I believe, whatever you may believe, even if it's different. You must support, produce, you must all of this. Tolerance, to me, very simply says, I may not agree with you, but I can live with you. I can work with you. I can coexist. I can coexist with you. We can get along despite our differences. And I've had the privilege of traveling across 5 continents to deliver presentations. And I've had audiences, single audiences, with Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, agnostics, atheists, all in one, from all over the world. And in that moment, for that season of time, we get along. We understand that there are differences, but the differences don't define us. We look for what is more common amongst us, what holds us together. And if we all choose to elevate that, we will move along with our differences, but we'll move along together. And if we're in leadership, either offered to us, given to us, or whether we grow into it, we have that responsibility to think clearly about how we behave, what we say, what we do not say, what we do not do, knowing at times it's best to be silent, knowing what hill to die on. It's almost like being in a really good marriage. And I would challenge anyone any area of leadership. And I think I'm a leader because I'm married, I'm a father. Begins in the home. If you can bring a solid leader's dynamic from your home into your neighborhood, into your community, into your society, into the world in which we live, and if we all kind of carry that idea, I want to be a good steward of the responsibility of leadership, we might see some changes. I can't judge those who are leading now at the highest levels, but I do know I pray for those in authority. I mean, I agree with them, but I still understand their responsibility and I want them to do it well. I pray for wise counselors for those who serve us. I'm told the world's wisest man was King Solomon. There's a little story in the Old Testament, and she'll check me on this one, but it's about leadership and the responsibility of wisdom. So, Rabbi, if I err, please forgive me. But one of his sons, Rehoboam, became king after his passing, and one of his father's enemies, Jeroboam, went in exile. Solomon dies, Jeroboam comes back, and he has audience with Rehoboam and says, "Listen, just don't be as harsh as your dad. If you're a little bit easy on us, we will serve you forever. You have a wonderful, mighty kingdom." He says, "You know what? I'll think about that. Give me 3 days to ponder it." Who does he go to? He goes to the wise men who had counseled his father. Now, when I saw this, I said, wait, the world's wisest man had wise counselors? What? I was so jazzed when I saw it. I said, wow, you can't go wrong, man. You get the world's wisest man, the people who counseled him. Dude, you're golden. They advise him, be wise, ease up. They will love you. They will serve you. Says, good. Then he went to his homies, his boys, who he hung out with, who he grew up with. What do you guys think? Man, don't be soft. You think your father was hard? You be harder than them. He hit them with whips, hit them with scorpions. You tell him you're going to buckle in and do what I say. You got this. He said, okay, who do I follow? The wise counselors or my boys? I'm going to go with my boys. And he tells Jeroboam, my father was tough. I'm going to be tougher. And I read the Old Testament in King James Version, and I heard, and now help me, Rabbi, if I'm not correct. To your tents, O Israel, is the words he says. In other words, we're out of here. I think he lost 10 tribes of the 12.
That's right.
One wrong move. So I give you my Jamaican understanding of it. Rabbi, if you want to correct me or adjust, please do so. But my point is, leaders need to understand that they don't know it all. And if we can surround ourselves with wise counsel who will check us, who will show us, you know what, that may seem right to you, but what about this? Now, who are these wise people? I believe many of them are flying under the radar, quiet and calm, like Rabbi Goldson, who can offer wisdom to those of us who are in leadership. And the thing is, we have so many resources. Parents, as leaders, have parenting classes. We have all these kinds of courses in leadership being offered in so many different ways, from speakers to educational. We have so many opportunities to learn how to lead well. We have so many resources. But until we go back to what you said, Dr. Redshoe, and change the way we think, it's not only how we think, I believe it's also what's in our hearts. And that's what's really hard to get to. So I tell the story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam and Solomon to talk about leadership and getting wise counsel. But I also have to go back to what you said. Yeah, we can get the knowledge, but where are our hearts? Have I learned to hold a mirror up and look at myself? Have I learned to see people differently? Have I learned to walk a mile in their shoes? Have I tried to understand what their lives are like, what their challenges are like, what their difficult choices are like, what they have to live with or face? Until I expand my thinking and change my heart, it's going to be very difficult. And one last thought is this. I believe everyone at some point, given any opportunity, should travel and see other people, see other cultures, see other lifestyles. It can be so educational. It can be so eye-opening. And for me, it has been quite transformational. I'm going to pause and let you respond to that.
Well, the story that you bring certainly is timely, relevant, and classic. The sages on that story observe the following. They say that the building of youth is destruction, and the destruction of old age is building. Because Rehoboam's friends, what did they think? What were they thinking? What was the basis of their advice? You have people that want to limit your power. And you need to strengthen yourself, because a lack of strength will cause a weakness of government and of culture. They thought they were building up the country. And what they did was cause it to become torn in two. The sages, they said there's a time when you need to take a step back. There's a time when you need to give up a little bit. And they told him, if you let the people, in the language of modern times, let them see that you feel their pain. You will win their loyalty, and then you can assert power because you will have trust. So it looked like they were telling him to loosen things up, to tear things down a little bit, but really they were laying the foundations of a greater strength, a greater stability and security. Now, in Judaism, there is a commandment to stand up for three people: your parent, the scholar, and the elderly. So your parent, it's gratitude. A scholar, the wisdom that the scholars acquired. The elderly, the wisdom of experience. You know, you say youth is wasted on the young. Beautiful phrase. It's also pointless to say it because young people won't understand it and old people already know it. There is, and by standing up for someone who's lived on this earth for 70 years or more, what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing in myself the awareness that some things you only learn through time and experience. And you know, we're so, you know, there's what they call the shiny new object syndrome. Ooh, there's a new book. Oh, there's a new program. Oh, there's new software. Oh, there's this new innovative idea. King Solomon also says there's nothing new under the sun.
Exactly.
What there is a new way of formulating an old idea. But I have to have the experience to recognize the old idea first, and then to try to articulate it in a way that's going to have new resonance. But we are so eager to find the new, to find the fresh, to find the interesting, the exciting, the novel, that we devalue the wisdom that is available to us. And we're just cheating ourselves, and we're losing priceless opportunities.
Which is why we created this podcast. So the idea came in November, this past November, and I was getting upset with how America was responding to some global and national issues, how our leaders and everyone who's a citizen is a leader because we vote, right? We're a democratic republic, right? So we're voting. And I was disappointed in how people were responding on TV and social media. And then things started heating up, and we had everyone had the torches ready to catch the beast. Of course, everyone had defined a different beast. And I thought, you know what, America, we can do better. I got so disappointed in America. So we can do better. And I thought, well, here I am sitting, enjoying my grandchildren and my granddogs. What do you mean we can do better? Yeah, look at yourself. What can you do? So I decided to create this, and I called the rabbi. I could do this by myself. And I thought, no. I met the rabbi because Dave Bricker introduced us in his ethics program. We were on a panel. And he and I have different, we come from very different places, and we almost always see things the same way, but from very different ways. And I love when we disagree. So I called him up and I said, you know, I want you to do something. I want you to say yes. This is what I want to do. And he said yes. So I thought, okay, good. Then we decided to invite people. The whole idea of doing this was to elevate the conversation and people's comfort level with differences and understanding the ethics and the impact of leadership. So Mark Brown, I want you to take the conversation to the next level. We can talk and we can sit in our armchairs till the cows come home. But you know what? If you're in middle school, or if you're a full grown up, allegedly, what can we do when we see some bullying, some injustice, some truncated thinking or action? What do you suggest we do? First, you can answer for middle school, and then for those of us reading social media.
Well, you know, one of my saddest experiences was getting a telephone call from a high school in New York 4 years ago. Please come to our school. You haven't been here for a long time. We need to talk to our kids. What's happening? Our kids have drawn lines. Who's going to vote, who was on Clinton and who was on Trump, and kids who went to kindergarten together as friends are no longer talking to each other.
That's terrible.
I have discovered it is really hard for me to change someone else. It has to really start with me. I have to really, and you know, when you're 13 years old, your brains haven't quite come in yet. So the maturity level is not that high. And the intolerance of others and the bullying is very, very easy. And the line kids have used forever, which I refute, is, hey, I was just kidding. I call it the big lie. One of the things we have to do is ask ourselves, if I put myself in their place, how would I truly feel? Now, for a 12-year-old, that might be a big ask. But how do you feel if your mother, your brother, your sister were to come home and tell you what someone did to them? You get really angry. You want to fight somebody. You want to throw a nice right hook. But if somebody in your family is receiving that, why do you think it's appropriate for you to dish that out in school? But a thornier one is this. You see it, and the bystanders are the ones who don't want to get involved very often. And I learned a couple of reasons for this, Dr. Redshoe. One is, if I get involved and say anything, they'll find a reason to pick on me next.
Yes.
So I'm safer in the background. And sadly, there are those who feel so insecure, they create reasons for others to become victims. If they can pick on that person, they're going to leave me alone. Therefore, I am safe.
Yes.
And that's really a sad place for us to be. So I can't change their behavior, but I challenge young people to have these conversations. Ask someone, how did it really make you feel? A child said, well, you know what? The whole school hates me. I said, really? But in their mind, if 4 or 5 alpha males or dominant type A's are leading the charge, the Gastons, then in their mind, the whole village wants to attack them.
Yes.
So one thing I ask kids to do is, okay, who's your favorite teacher? They tell me. What's your favorite subject? They tell me. What do you love to do at school? They tell me. You really enjoy that? Oh, it's awesome. I love going to drama. It's really cool. And Miss Wilson, she is the best in the whole world. I love her class. So you don't hate the whole school, and the whole school doesn't hate you, does it? Do they? Well, no. One thing that I can do, and it's difficult when you're 12, 13 years old, is to magnify the positive I experience and pay less attention to those 2 or 3 people who would make your life difficult. Because you know what? If I focus on what they're going to do, this, they're going to say that, they're going to call me this. I live in a space of expectancy of the negative while not seeing the positive that's right here. So my reaction first has to be, okay, what are my blessings here? What am I enjoying here? Who are my friends here? How can I invest my time and be in a place where I'm with them? Number 2, Don't be afraid to tell a responsible adult who you trust. It could be a favorite teacher, a ball coach, a counselor, a principal, or assistant, somebody who makes you feel that you are worth investing their time into. Every child needs an advocate in a school. We may have programs that counsel. Every child needs an advocate. I love seeing film of principals and APs who greet the kids at the door, high five at the bus. How you doing, Josh? I love seeing that. So as a child, you can't fight the battle by yourself. That puts some responsibility on the adults on the campus to be vigilant. And I know it's difficult to be a teacher. My family, we have teachers 5 generations deep. Trust me, I get it. However, it's not just about the 3 R's anymore. The world has changed, and teachers now find themselves as advocates, as surrogate parents, as the ones who are buying kids lunch, and there's so much involved. But here's the potential beauty of it. A school is a community which in many ways is a microcosm of the world at large. So if we in leadership, educators, administrators, counselors, faculty members, even those who work in ancillary staff, if we can create a kind of an environment that replicates what the world should be for 7, 8 hours a day, we can give our kids a quote unquote fighting chance to see what a society can be if we create that for them. It is a big ask, especially now we're doing so many virtual classrooms. But if the idea becomes one that drives not only our thinking, but our emotion, and as a follow through our behavior, if we can help create that for young people and guide them through this process, we truly are leading and guiding and growing ethical thinking, morally responsible, and wise young people. Sadly, too many of us are giving the opposite example. By the way, we adults, the way we post on a social media, not social, but a social media, by the way we respond to people, by the name calling, by the vitriol that we spew at people we don't even know, and we fail to understand one key thing. I was traveling 100 days a year when I was speaking, many years ago. My youngest, now 26, was about 3 or 4 years old. I got back one weekend after a trip, and he was there to meet me. My little son, David, as I could not wait for my David hug. I said, Dave, son, give daddy a hug. And he said, talk to the hand. That's very old for you young people who don't know what it is. It was a way of saying, don't talk to me in my face. I said, son, where did you get that from? And my beautiful brown-eyed baby looked up at me and said, you want a piece of me, huh? And I kind of laughed. But it occurred to me that my 3-year-old was simply imitating his older siblings. Why do I say that? We do not realize the power of our own influence as adults. What we write, what we post, what we publish, how we behave, when we protest, how we do that, we are literally teaching those under our sphere of influence how to behave, how to live, how to think, and how to respond. It has to start with me checking myself. What standard do I live by? How do I treat those who are not like me? How can I live, if nothing else, civilly within a civil society in this civilization? How do you make those words meaningful? It has to start with me, how I think, how I feel, how I communicate, because there's so many people behind us. Unbeknownst to us, we are influencing so many people silently. We've got to check ourselves and just step back. Is this the kind of world I want to live in? And more importantly, I want to create for those who are following me. And as a child, 13, 14, 15, if I didn't think I had an advocate, I feel lost. I feel hopeless. I feel alone. I say, find that one advocate you trust. Talk with them. Be honest with them. Let them help you. Let them guide you, and learn to use language in a way that you can turn things around. An ancient book of wisdom says a soft answer can turn away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. We have to learn to communicate, teach to communicate, and take personal responsibility, and know that even though I may be a very small, insignificant person, I have influence, and ask myself, how do I use it? It's a thought.
That is beautiful. Aya has a comment that I think speaks to what you were saying. Unfortunately, these days, it's sometimes reversed. Due to power and their own weaknesses, the challenges are more focused on negativities and to discourage rather than encouraging and putting a spell on positive actions and strengths.
So how do we turn it around? Again,
that's the question. What do we do? What are 3 things we can do?
Well, I think the rabbi again is itching to respond. I'll let him speak here.
Well, I think we already said the first one, Rabbi, which is first start with us. So that's number 1. I think we can agree with that. Yeah. Rabbi?
Well, it's just to amplify that. And I mean, you already said this, Mark, that we learn through observation. And when we see others acting a certain way, it encourages us to act in the same way. Which means if we see people acting with nobility and civility and dignity, it draws us to them. We want to be more noble and more civil and more dignified. If we see people acting in a way that's coarse and base and aggressive, then that legitimizes that kind of behavior in us and makes us more prone to it. And so recognizing that every one of us has a responsibility, first to myself and then to others. The sages say, stand up many students. It's an interesting phrasing. But before you get to the phrasing, to whom are they speaking? I happen to have a career as a teacher. Are they talking to me? Now that I've retired from teaching, are they no longer speaking to me? No, everything I do is teaching those who observe me that this is acceptable behavior, or this is admirable behavior, or this is, I'm either teaching people to act, to raise themselves, to elevate themselves, or teaching them it's okay not to. And so standing them up means, as a teacher, do I want my students to continue to depend upon me? Teachers and parents, we have one thing in common. We want to make ourselves obsolete. I don't mind if my students or children, adult children, call me and ask advice, but I don't want them to be incapable of making decisions on their own. I want them to have learned, the old cliche, teach a person to fish and he has food for a lifetime. Teach a person to think, teach a person to have cultural sensitivity, teach a person to have the courage to make those choices that are uncomfortable, that are difficult, but that are critical. That's how we stand up others to follow our example.
You've got change ourselves, we've got teach others. I think we need to use our voice well. I think we need to speak up, speak out, speak boldly, but speak respectfully. And there's a big difference between speaking out and doing so respectfully. So many people use their voices loudly, vociferously, but also negatively, to go back to what Aya said earlier. If we speak boldly, respectfully, and wisely, I think that I believe people are more prone to listen when the approach is done respectfully. It can be forceful, but respectful. And that's why I'm a proponent of using the language well. I don't take wordsmithing lightly at all, because people can say in their mind the same thing in different ways. Very, very quickly, Dr. Red Shoe has a wonderful idea. And she comes to me and I say, listen, doctor, I know what you're trying to do here, but that's never going to work. I mean, this piece here, it's not going to happen. It's ridiculous. Don't even bother with that. You go to Rabbi Yonason, and he says, Dr. That's I like where you're going with this. I am a bit concerned about this piece. You might want to rework that a little bit and then bring it back, and maybe we might see if we can make it work for us. Now, in his mind and my mind, we have both told you the same thing. But the language I have used was very negative, and depending on how you receive it, it might crush you. As far as I'm concerned, I told you that isn't going to work the way it is, fix it. But that's not how I expressed it. I expressed it harshly, dismissively, and negatively. Whereas Yonason says, okay, I see where you're going. You might want to repair that, adjust it, and then maybe we find something that we can use. The sad truth is so many of us in this world speak the way my example was, and they believe they speak the way Jonason's example is. We have got to not only think about what we say, but the piece beyond that is, how might my words be received?
Yes.
And that only comes from being concerned about the ears that hear it, about the people who are receiving it, about trying to understand the circumstance and the context of their lives, because sometimes the when is also important based upon where they are, what they live with, and what they're doing. What that boils down to is not just changing ourselves, not just educating people, and not just speaking forcefully but respectfully. It also comes from literally trying to see the world through the eyes of others. That's why I love when individuals, young people, are tasked with debating a point to which they are personally opposed.
Yes.
I think it's a wonderful exercise that might serve many of us good who are eagerly posting on social media. What if you made an effort to defend a position opposed to yours eloquently, respectfully, and intelligently? If we did that for 6 months apiece, it would, I believe, transform what we see in social media. It'll transform the way we talk to each other, because now we all speak with greater understanding of each other. And while I'm Christian and Rabbi is Jewish, it doesn't affect our relationship or respect for each other and our ability to work together. For some, it's a deal breaker. For some people, I say, in political correct terms, I am the conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical, right-wing, born-again Christian. Oh, I don't want to talk to you. You're a bigot. You're a racist. You're a hater. You're an anti-this. Whoa. I just told you the label people give to me, but you know nothing about me personally. If we can get past the labels and see people.
Yes.
I've said a lot, and I'll stop there.
Well, I wanted to make a point on what you said, Mark Brown. I think that we do have an obligation with how we speak to others. But we also have an obligation as the receiver. So for instance, I, as a woman who's a refugee, I'm pretty accustomed, people dismissing me, being very negative, unfair, unkind. And what I've learned is to listen with curiosity. Why are they dismissing me? What's that about? That was vitriolic. Why? Why is my idea so outlandish? And I think that if we can all ask ourselves, what is our obligation as speakers and listeners? And I think we don't just have to go home crying. Now, we can be very victimized. And over time, maybe we, instead of just feeling victimized, we can become the hero of our own story and say, why is this person being mean or ridiculously one-sided or whatever? And really try and have compassion, even as they're trying to beat us down. And I think that there's an obligation to not be the victim and just solely the victim, but to be the hero. So when I worked with kids and adults, I said that there was bullies, heroes, victims, right? And witnesses.
Yeah.
And really, if you're not a hero or a bully, you can't be a victim without trying to stay that way for forever, because you have an obligation to learn from that experience, like my parents told me. And I'm not victim shaming, and I'm not in any way doing that. I'm just saying there's roles we play with every incident. We have to look at those 4 roles. If you're a bystander, you talked about that, and you don't take action, you become a bully. So either you're a victim or a bully, but we have to speak up somehow, maybe not in that moment. And, you know, the whole idea of being a witness, we're all witnesses in social media. And sometimes you see people overreacting. So someone says something terrible And then you see people being really mean and calling them names and do it. What good does that do? So what do you suggest, Mark and the good rabbi? What actions can we take? We've already talked about we're going to work on ourselves. And the second thing, we're going to learn through observation. And then we talked about using our voice. But let's say the next time we see some injustice or someone being mean or a bully on a social media or in person, what is some action that you recommend that everyone who's listening take?
Good question.
Oh, thank you. Every now and then I come up with one.
Because, I know there are those who are very unwilling. I don't want to get involved. The
Yes.
phrase, I don't want to get involved is one that's been used for perhaps centuries. I don't even know. I've been around that long. But why would I want to insert myself in someone else's fight or someone else's situation? And I must confess, in high school, my last year of high school, there was a gentleman named Paul Hay. He called me the arbitrator. And I hadn't really thought about this for a long time. But, at the age of 17, 18, I always tried to get individuals who were clearly hot-headed, bound for a confrontation, to just stop, separate themselves, and explain why their emotions have run high. What did he say about my mother? Okay. Why do you think he said that? Why did you say that? I was playing around, or they might admit I wanted to hurt him because he hurt me. And the conversation with somebody in the middle oftentimes led to the true root of the problem, which honestly, very often had nothing to do with their personal relationship. It was something else in their life that was manifested in the reaction at that time within a different context. But we never take time to go through all of that. We're so busy doing this and that, so we can post a comment. It's anonymous. We don't see someone's pain in their face. We don't see the hurt. We don't understand. We don't take time to think. Now, in person, sadly, one of the first cautions is, if I get involved, do I run the risk of getting physical harm? Is someone holding a weapon? I hate to say it, in the current world, that's a thing. Is somebody carrying a weapon? You want to be wise. If you see where you could use a conversation and a listening ear, and sometimes stepping in, having a conversation is enough of a distraction to turn thoughts away from what's happening in the moment. They give you their attention for a moment. Their eyes are off off their adversary, and they engage with you for a moment, and they talk with you. And having that conversation separates two potential combatants and gives them some room to stop and think. Now, I have not studied this. I have not, I have not got a green psychology or anything like that. I just go back to when I was 17 years old, seeing guys in school who wanted, I went to an all boys school, testosterone all day long for like 7 years. So I saw this happen quite a bit. But I always thought if we could talk about it, understand the why, what's going on? What's the what? What's the why? What is the true why, the second why, or the third why behind it? And eventually they end up in a conversation. I had one fight in high school. In 7th grade, it lasted about 3.819526 seconds because a guy put dust in my eyes and hit me once, and it was over. But I was never a fighter. I've always tried to find ways to reconcile and get people to understand each other. And I really find that language is important. What you say, how you say it, the words you choose wisely can literally diffuse difficult situations. Again, the proverb says, a soft answer will turn away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. We have to understand the power of those words, the wisdom behind that. And each of us can be that arbitrator. We can be that person who comes in the middle and says, hey, what's really going on here? And when you can empathize, you know what? I have been there myself. It's a bonus. You can't always empathize, but when you can, find out, listen, find out how you can tell your story to say, I know how you feel, and here's what I did, what happened to me. And you can build a relationship. Do we all have time for that always? No, but it's one way that worked for me. My gosh, 40 plus years ago. That's one way. I know Rabbi's got some ideas. I'd love to hear what those are as well. I know time is going short now, I realize.
Yeah, we're short on time, but I had an incident a few weeks ago on LinkedIn when I had a respondent or a commenter who turned out to be a real live troll.
Welcome to the real world.
Well, I haven't had much of that on LinkedIn. It just doesn't seem to be the environment that
Yeah.
attracts such people. But this guy, what he was looking for a fight. He
Yeah.
wasn't interested in a discussion. And after a couple of exchanges, I decided to simply withdraw. There was not going to be any benefit. Someone else came to my defense. And what I love about what you're saying, Mark, is that the idea of being a bystander, the one advantage that there may be to social media is that I can get involved without fear of physical harm.
Correct.
And this person who came to my defense, he was very civil, he was very rational. He didn't get any farther than I did or would have, but what he did was demonstrate that he wasn't going to leave me hanging out to dry. He was taking responsibility for me. So I was exercising restraint because I felt there would be no point. Someone else was stepping in because he wanted to show that he didn't feel it was just the way I was being treated. And I saw this as a victory for all. Now, since we're just about out of time, I want to slip in here our word for the day. Because I think it's relevant here. And the word is a complicated term and concept. It's even a little hard to say. It's phenomenology, which is both a philosophy and a form of psychology. And to make it simple and limited in the context, it's essentially, at least according to Martin Heidegger, he described it that reality and consciousness are co-creators, and they depend, and that understanding depends upon the relationship between them. And what that means, to keep it simple, we talk about nature versus nurture. Part of me is intrinsic. Part of me is shaped by the things that happen to me. But what this is suggesting is that part of me is determined by my responses to what happens to me. And that what the things we're talking about, I always like to say there's no app for being ethical. You can't just plug the variables into a program and be told what to do. It's complicated. It changes. We don't always have clarity. But the ethical person is the one who grapples with these kinds of questions and these types of decisions. And when we grapple, when we struggle, when we make our best effort to choose the course of action that is most ethical, most just, most noble, that changes us. It steers us one way, or it can steer us the other way. And those little decisions, or those little struggles to make the right decision over the course of days and weeks and years and the course of our lives, that will determine what kind of person we are. And when we look back at the road we've traveled and we look at who we have become, we are the totality of the choices that we make and the process of making those choices. And so if you feel that it's a struggle, if you feel it's a challenge, good. That means you're getting it right. And keep struggling and keep being challenged.
And keep grappling with the gray, right?
That's a great book. That's the rabbi's book. Keep grappling with the gray.
That's it. One last thought I want to share. It comes from an Old Testament writer, prophet named Micah. And he talks about what God requires. And again, I'm not a Bible scholar, but I like the idea of God, our divine being, giving us a requirement. He says, seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. Love justice, seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. If all of us, as we struggle, we go through this phenomenology, if we want to do what's just and right, if we want to be merciful, and if we walk humbly, in how we speak, how we carry ourselves, not to be downtrodden, but to walk humbly. If we all chose to do that, I think the grappling becomes a little bit easier, but certainly much more worthwhile. And it also helps us to shift our relationships, how we treat those who may not be like us. And if we all did this together, I'm hopeful enough to believe we would see a significant reduction in these harsh behaviors, words, and attitudes. And perhaps the idea of civilization might become closer to a reality.
Very well said, sir. Very well said.
I
Beautiful.
think that's a good place.
I think it's a great place. And I apologize to everyone for going over. I lost track of time. I was so enjoying this conversation that we went long. So I remind everyone to check out Mark Brown, CSP, a world champion speaker and thinker, and check him out on his website. I put that in the links. Check out the Rabbi's book, Grappling with the Gray. And we can be found on our YouTube channels, Vimeo, and the Rabbi has now put us on our podcast on Buzzsprout. And where else, Rabbi?
The most popular places: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. You look for us, you'll find us. And we'd encourage people to please drop by and leave a review, because that helps us get the word out to others.
And if you have questions for us, please ask us questions. You can always ask at drredshoe.com. And I will share them with the Rabbi. We want to know, what is it that you want input on? And if you want input from anybody, you can contact them directly or through us, whichever you prefer. Mark Brown, we adore you. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's been fun trying to seek justice and loving mercy and walking humbly with you. You have much to share the world. We're honored that you shared some time with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure. Blessings
Thank
to
you,
you,
Mark.
Thank you.
And Rabbi, as always, thank you.
Doctor, you're wonderful.
Bye, everyone. You take care.